This is Qodo Merge, agentic code review for GitLab, GitHub, and Bitbucket. The goal of Qodo Merge is to surface design flaws, bugs, and violations of your internal compliance guidelines. Qodo Merge acts as a senior developer. It's going to be giving suggestions based upon best practices and coding standards, not only using the context of this single repository, but optionally other repositories throughout your Git provider. It is really meant to increase both quality and velocity. So developers who act on this analysis reduce the chance of pushing code that is non-conformant, as well as things like missing test coverage. It also looks to save time, right? So the developer who owns this, they have the data immediately, they can act on it immediately, versus the flow with human reviews where you're going to need to submit it to a human reviewer, ask for their time to look at it, and then the feedback flow sometimes to return, it could be days, or during a busy period, it could even be weeks. That is automatically removed. It is actionable now. There are 4 main functions within Qodo Merge that are configurable, so you can kind of pick and choose what you want and configure them as well. First one is describe, so this is pretty straightforward. We're never going to remove what you have from a description, but we're going to add what has happened within your commit, as well as give you a nice visual merge-made diagram to understand exactly within your application what areas have been impacted by your commit. Then we get to review. So this is a high-level overview. We're going to start with a level of effort that reflects the complexity of the changes that need to be reviewed. Again, we're going to see whether tests have been generated. We're going to have things like security concerns, bugs, just general areas of review that we want to focus on. So this is like the first place you go for review to understand what's going on. Then you get to improve. So improve is about code suggestions. These code suggestions can be accepted directly from the merge request pull request. You can also chat with the bot, so you can make small adjustments and then again, implement that directly from this interface. So no need to go back to the IDE. And the context of the code suggestions is up to you. So by default, we're going to have not only the commit that you've changed within the repository, but you can also implement Qodo Aware, which is full instance reg indexing, GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket. So again, that concept of, hey, I want to look at other repositories for best practices, or maybe my projects are dependent. I want to look for code duplication. That's what Qodo Aware is all about. We're also going to look at your best practices. So things that you might have in Confluence or Google Docs or wikis. We're going to put that centralized into a best practices, and we're going to use that to inform the suggestions as well. And we also have the concept of ticketing compliance, which is to say, I'm going to look at that description of the associated ticket, and hopefully that description is beefy enough that I can basically say, hey, the code in this commit meets the functional requirements that the planner had in mind. And then we get to compliance. So best practices inform the model. It helps it, analyze and make decisions and what it should suggest. Compliance is a hard-coded list. So this is a list of what I think of as can't pass go. If I have any problems in these areas, we should not be merging. So every single time this is going to be explicitly analyzed. And again, what you really care about, you can put within this compliance guideline. So let's talk about testing specifically. As I mentioned before, when we scroll up to this review area, it's always going to tell me if it has found tests that are relevant to this particular set of code changes. I have decided to create a custom label that is going to reflect this. So if you're a label user, you can have all sorts of labels that are going to reflect the status for easy sorting and auditing later. And I can also use compliance for even an additional enforcement. So in this particular case, I did define compliance to look for specific coverage for specific features. And here it has failed. So automatically, I know as a user, I've got a testing problem. This is not going to be able to pass. So now I need to create tests. And how do I do that? I can do that with Qodo as well. Over on our Gen side of the platform, We integrate with VS Code, the full JetBrains suite, so everything from IntelliJ, PyCharm, all that good stuff, as well as Visual Studio itself. And here I have a agentic mode. So we'll come here and look. Of course, I could just have an agentic chat and say, here's the tests, and please generate tests against, the code changes that I've made. That's surely an option. The challenge with agentic is the prompting. You need to get it right. And I think we've all seen just a couple of words can surely make a change. And so after you've gone through the process of conversation with your agent, and you've come up with the exact flow that you want, this is why we call them workflows, you're going to define basically this agentic workflow. And so whatever steps, whatever process that you want, whatever has worked from execution, you're going to define it in your workflow. And of course, you can include both out-of-the-box MCPs as well as all of your custom MCPs to plug into all the tooling throughout your SDLC. And you're just going to simply define it here. So what this means is it is a reusable entity for you, but not only for you, but for your team as well. So you can share it as a TOML file, which means that everybody can now have a standard of this is how we are going to unit test. And it's as simple as just executing it, of course. So if we come back to this particular log of the past execution, tick it off. And of course, it goes through the process. It goes through analyzing. And in this particular workflow, not only did I ask it to identify suites that I already had, look at behaviors, create the tests, I also asked it to execute the tests and refine and keep going until the tests actually pass. And so that's what I have ended up with. I've ended up with both files that have been generated for testing, which I can then commit to my PR and have yet another analysis from Qodo merge. Qodo merge is going to rerun every single time there's a new commit. But I also am not locked into my IDE. So if I choose, I can actually use Qodo command. So Qodo command is going to allow from any CLI, so my terminals here in my IDE, as well as any terminal, both Windows Bash or Mac or Linux, I'm going to be able to run Qodo command. So as I mentioned previously, that agent definition, that workflow can be exported in a TOML file. And so I could run it directly here from my desktop. So in a situation where you're like, well, actually, I wouldn't want this to, use up this space. I would want to keep going. That's great. Boot up a terminal and kick off that particular workflow against the branch that you're on. You can have as many workflows and as many agents going as terminals that you have. And so there's really no restriction with Qodo. You can actually create agents directly from the command line. So if you're just somebody who prefers not to be in an IDE, this is the place for you. And speaking of agents and workflows, that merge request flow, that agent is actually accessible from Qodo command using simply Qodo review. And the result is that you will get an output right here. So if you're in a pattern where you do not submit a commit to a merge request or a pull request until you're really ready to go, this is a great way, again, as a developer, to get immediate feedback on things that need to be actionable. And again, this is going in the background while I continue to code within my IDE. Thanks so much for your time today.